Jesus reveals how he heals the pain no one sees. His presence restores you tonight. Have you ever felt a pain so silent that even words couldn't reach it? An anguish hidden behind social smiles, a crushing weight that no one notices, but that every night makes you implode inside? That feeling of being surrounded by people, but completely invisible, as if your soul was screaming, but no one was listening. If you've experienced this, or are experiencing it now, then listen carefully because Jesus reveals to you today what has been ignored by everyone, including you. There is a type of pain that the world does not know how to heal. Therapies fail. Words don't console. And even prayer sometimes doesn't seem to reach the ceiling. But this pain, this one that you try to hide even from yourself, did not escape his eyes. You have not been forgotten. He is not being punished. And what's to come in this video could be the beginning of your deeper restoration. There are spiritual truths that have been hidden for centuries, secrets of God's heart that few dare reveal. Today, you will be part of a rare group of people who will access this revelation, not because you are perfect, but because you were called. Yes, called. Do you feel this? This restlessness in your chest is not random now. It is the spirit of God leading you here because something will be broken today. Get ready. This is not just another message. It is divine intervention. It's the answer you've been silently begging for. The presence of Jesus is already in this environment, and he is about to touch the wound that no one sees, but that screams in your soul every day. Stay with me until the end, because what will be revealed, it can change your life forever. Take a deep breath and open your heart to this message, because the presence of God is already moving here. This is not just another video. This is a sacred moment, an environment prepared by the Holy Spirit to speak directly to you. You didn't click here by chance. Jesus brought you to this message because there is a specific pain in your heart that he decided to touch today. And before continuing, I need to ask you something that goes beyond a digital gesture. If this word is touching you this far, enjoy this video as an act of faith, as a spiritual sign saying, I receive this healing in the name of Jesus. This isn't about numbers. It's about evangelization. When you like it, this message reaches more people who, like you, are screaming inside. And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, subscribe now. Here we don't deliver content, we deliver divine direction. You will realize that each video that comes to you will not be by chance. It will be Jesus calling you again. And if you already feel that this message is stirring your spirit, write in the comments now, Jesus sees me and heals me. Don't be afraid to state this publicly. There is power in your confession. You are part of something bigger, a generation that no longer wants empty religion, but living revelations. A generation that recognizes Jesus reveals to you secrets that heal what no one can touch. But it's not time to leave yet. Jesus revealed something very important about this situation, and you need to hear it before leaving this video. What comes now may be the answer you have always silently sought. Get ready. The reveal is about to begin. How many times have you felt like you were screaming inside but no one was listening? As if the whole world passed around you without realizing that behind your gaze there is an abyss? Maybe you are smiling, working, even doing everything that is expected of you. But something in you screams in silence. There are pains that have no name, wounds that no one sees. But what if I told you that there is a look that penetrates where the soul hides? That there is someone who sees you inside, even when you no longer have the strength to speak? Today, Jesus reveals to you that he doesn't just see, he understands. And this story will show this with an intensity that perhaps you have never felt before. She walked with her body bent and her soul in pieces. There was no sparkle in Anna's eyes, just the shadow of painful waiting. She was a sterile woman in a society that valued women for their ability to bear children. Her belly was closed, but the judgment that weighed on her was open. Peninnah, her rival, provoked her year after year, as if the suffering of not conceiving was not enough. Anna smiled when she needed to, carried out her duties, but there was a scream contained in her soul, a lament so deep that it seemed to have been buried alive inside her. How many people live like this? presentable on the outside, but emotionally drowned on the inside. That day, she couldn't take it anymore. She went up to the temple, but it was no ordinary cult. She did not take animal sacrifices. He took his own broken heart. Before the altar, Anna did not make a speech, did not raise her hands, did not cry out in a loud voice. She just moved her lips, no sound, because her pain was so intimate, so overwhelming that not even words could escape. The biblical text says, Hannah spoke in her heart, only her lips moved, and Eli thought she was drunk. The priest, the man who represented God there, looked at her and didn't see intercession. He saw lack of control. He didn't see faith. He saw imbalance. Imagine what it's like to give yourself at the altar with your last bit of strength and be misunderstood right there. Maybe you know this place. Perhaps you have already prayed in silence, with your fists clenched and your chest exploding, and felt judged even inside the church. Have you ever heard phrases like, "You lack faith," "You are murmuring," "You are in sin"? But Jesus reveals to you, Anna was not wrong. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, at God's feet, with her raw, unfiltered pain. And even when man didn't understand, heaven did. Because there are pains that only God understands, prayers that only the Spirit interprets, tears that only the altar absorbs. And here comes the most powerful point. Even though she was misunderstood, Anna did not give up praying. It didn't go away. She explained herself but did not defend herself, because his hope was not in Eli, it was in God. This is pure faith, faith without an audience, faith that does not seek human validation, and that faith was enough. Because after that silent prayer, after that moment when your soul poured itself out without the world hearing, something changed, and the miracle came. The belly opened, Samuel was born, and now, let me bring you to this altar. How many times have you tried to explain your pain and no one understood? How many times have you swallowed your tears because you couldn't stand hearing that it was drama, exaggeration, or a lack of faith? But is that really it? Is your invisible pain a sin? Or is it just the kind of pain that moves the heart of God? Maybe you don't need more people judging you. Maybe you just need someone who really sees you. Jesus sees you. Jesus understands your silent prayer. And more, he responds. Even when others call you crazy, weak, or faithless, Jesus is hearing what your soul cannot express. And even more, he doesn't just listen, he acts. Now listen to this. Perhaps the biggest mistake you are making today is thinking that Jesus is silent because you don't feel anything. But what if I told you that he is working precisely in silence? That the absence of audible response is not the absence of presence? Hannah did not hear a prophecy that day. There was no angel. He didn't fall into ecstasy. She just prayed, and she left there transformed. Because when you pray with your soul, the sky moves, even if no one around you notices. And now, I want to give you a challenge of soul, faith, and courage. Comment now in the comments on the phrase, Jesus understands what no one sees. Don't write this on impulse. Write if that word confronted something inside you. Write if you have also been crying in silence, if you have also been judged at the altar, if you have also been accused when you just wanted to be healed, because this comment could be your leap of faith today. And more, share this video. Send it to someone you suspect is living this invisible war, because perhaps you are Jesus's instrument to break someone's silence. And click like right now if you believe that Jesus is the one who sees what no one sees. Make this like a spiritual declaration, I am not alone, he sees me. But there is an even quieter and more insidious kind of pain. It's the one that hides behind the smile, the one who pretends to be strong so as not to worry others, who says it's okay while screaming inside. And the cruelest? Almost no one notices. But what if I told you that there was a biblical character who lived exactly that? Prepare your heart. What comes now could be the mirror of your soul. There are pains that scream, but there are also those who smile. And these are the most difficult to discern because no one suspects a heart that appears to be at peace. It's like a fire behind a closed window. On the outside, everything seems under control, but inside the world is falling apart. And the worst? Sometimes you convince yourself that smiling is your obligation, that being strong is your only option. But what if I told you that Jesus never asked you to carry that weight disguised as a smile? That, on the contrary, he wants to meet you right where your laughter ends and your pain begins. Jesus now reveals to you what is behind Job's mask, and perhaps also behind yours. Imagine a man who, in the blink of an eye, loses everything: family, health, wealth, reputation, friends, future. Everything that gave structure to his identity collapsed like a house of cards in the wind, and even so, he tries to maintain his posture, try to remain firm. He tries not to collapse completely because it seems like if he falls, everything around him will break with it. That man is Job. And what many people forget is that in the midst of all his tragedy, he still tried to preserve his dignity. He still tried to keep the faith. He still tried to protect those around him from the depths of his inner collapse. Job had been a respected, honored, admired man. His word was law, his advice was sought, his life was a reference. But from one day to the next, he found himself in ruins, covered in wounds, sitting in ashes. And yet, he still spoke with reverence. He still maintained phrases of faith. I still tried not to curse. I tried to appear whole when inside I was in tatters. And in the midst of it all, he said, "This still comforts me, that I did not deny the words of the saint." Can you understand what this means? Job was saying, I'm dying inside, but I keep trying to believe. This is the pain of smiling on the outside and crying on the inside. The pain of keeping the mask of faith when what you really want is to disappear. How many times have you done this? How many times have you smiled so as not to worry your family? Have you ever gotten out of bed even though you felt like you couldn't make it another day? Have I ever said it's okay because I knew that if I started telling the truth, I wouldn't be able to stop crying? Some say this is strength, but what if it's a cry for help disguised as self-control? What if that smile is, in fact, your way of saying, I can't fall because no one will catch me? Catch. Jesus reveals to you today that he sees beyond that smile. He is not fooled by emotional performance. He knows the kind of pain you can't even share with those closest to you. He understands what you try to stifle in the name of stability in others. Job tried to protect his faith, his integrity, and even his friends, but he went so far as to say, I would rather die. And do you know why this is powerful? Because this shows that even the most righteous man in the Bible felt like giving up, and yet he was not rejected by God. So let me ask you with all courage, could it be that your fight today is not with God, but with the idea that you cannot weaken? Could it be that you are so busy trying not to worry others, that you forgot to let God take care of you? Could it be that this laughter that you use as armor is not preventing the cure from coming? What's more, have you been taught that feeling pain is a sign of weakness? When, in fact, recognizing pain can be the first step towards healing, Job finally unburdened himself. He shouted, accused, he questioned. He was sincere to the bone with God. And that's exactly where the restoration process began. When he stopped pretending, when he tore the soul, when he admitted he wasn't well. You don't have to be everyone's hero. You just need to be true to Jesus, because he does not demand perfection. He demands delivery. And often, the greatest act of faith is admitting that you are in pieces. And now I'm going to tease you with something that perhaps no one has ever had the courage to tell you. Aren't you making yourself worse because you're trying to look too good? Isn't your faith stifled within your attempt to appear strong? Comment now. If you had the courage to face this truth, the phrase, I don't need to hide my pain from Jesus. Because this comment could be the breakthrough heaven has been waiting for. And share. Yes, share with that person who everyone admires for their strength, but who you suspect is falling apart inside. You might save a soul with this video. Jesus reveals to you, there is healing in letting off steam. There is power in vulnerability. There is liberation when you let go of control and throw yourself into the Father's arms. And remember, you're not betraying your faith by feeling weak. You're being real with the God who knows your depths. But don't think that this was the greatest pain faced by anyone in the Bible. There is a pain that surpasses all others. It's not just the loss. It's not just the collapse. It's abandonment. It is to feel that even God himself has turned his face. Have you ever felt this? Well, you know, even Jesus felt it. And what this story reveals will confront everything you believe about divine silence. Get ready for what comes now. After smiling so as not to worry, after trying to appear strong when everything collapses inside, there is an even more cruel pain. It is not the pain of hiding the suffering of others. It is the despair of feeling that even God has turned his face away. There is no weight more heartbreaking than thinking that not even heaven responds to you anymore. And if even friends fail, if even family moves away, everything still seems bearable. But when you have the feeling that God himself has abandoned you, that's when the abyss really opens. But what if I told you that even Jesus felt this way, and that there is a secret hidden in this dark moment that can redefine your faith? Jesus now reveals to you the loneliest pain in the Bible, and it may be exactly the answer to yours. It was night. The sky was heavy like lead, and the breeze seemed to cut through the skin. The stars were there, but none seemed to shine. The Garden of Gethsemane was silent, but inside Jesus, a storm was raging. He knew what was coming. I knew about the cross. I knew the pain. But what few understand is that what tore his soul apart was not physical fear. It was not human suffering. It was the weight of abandonment. It was the anguish of carrying the sin of the world and feeling for a moment separation from the Father. My soul is deeply saddened until death. He said that. The Son of God, the same one who healed the sick, raised the dead, calmed storms, now prostrate in a garden, begging, "Father, if possible, take this cup away from me." This is more than pain. This is spiritual despair. This passage is perhaps the most disconcerting in the Bible because it shows us Jesus in his maximum humanity. There is no aura of glory. There is no transfiguration. Just sweat like drops of blood, face on the ground, and a soul imploding in loneliness. And this is where many Christians stumble, because they believe that feeling abandoned by God is a sign of spiritual failure. But Jesus reveals it to you. Even Christ himself felt the weight of this silence. How many times have you gotten down on your knees, prayed with everything you had, and left the room even more empty? How many times have you cried out for an answer, and all you heard was the sound of your own breathing? And at these times the mind screams, "Has God forgotten me? Am I not worthy? Is he really with me?" But let me tell you something that perhaps you have never been told. It is not the absence of feelings that determines the presence of God. He doesn't need to shout to be close, and Gethsemane proves it. God was there, silent, invisible, but present. Because sometimes the pain of abandonment is the portal to the glory of resurrection. Jesus knew he would be betrayed. He knew he would be handed over, beaten, mocked, crucified. And yet, it was. But before all that, he had to face the darkest moment of the human soul, the feeling that not even heaven was listening. And maybe you are in that garden today. Face down, sweating fear, crying guilt, begging for relief. And it seems like nothing changes. But listen, if even Jesus went through this, who told you that you need to look strong all the time? This is the question that can dismantle you now. Have you been confusing God's silence with rejection? Could it be that deep down, you think you don't deserve to be heard by him? Because Jesus reveals to you an overwhelming truth. God's silence is not absence. It is preparation. When he is silent, it is because he is about to do something that will silence all of hell. But first, he leads you to the point where you no longer have any strength of your own, only total dependence. In Gethsemane, Jesus was alone. The disciples slept. The angels were quiet. The sky seemed mute. And yet, he didn't run away. He stayed. He faced it. He delivered. And that is the greatest act of faith anyone can have, continuing even when everything seems lost. This is real faith, not the faith that moves mountains, but the faith that remains when the mountain falls on you. And now, with all love and courage, I challenge you to confront your own belief. Do you really think that God's silence means that he has abandoned you? Or is it in this silence that he works most? Comment now. with all the truth that exists in you. Even in the silence, I believe that He is with me. Write if this pain of abandonment has ever tried to paralyze you. Write if you've ever thought about giving up because it seemed like God didn't hear you anymore. And if this video touched you, if this word tore something inside you, click like as an act of spiritual resistance. Yes, like a silent cry saying, I still believe. Jesus reveals to you that Gethsemane was not the end. It was the bridge. It was there that heaven touched earth. It was there that the plan of salvation was sealed. And perhaps what you experience today, this silence, this darkness, this anguish, is also the beginning of your resurrection. But wait, what happened after that night will further challenge your understanding of pain and peace. Because the next story takes us to a place where the body lies down, but the mind is not silent. A night where the soul insists on not resting. And what Jesus does in this scenario may be exactly what you need today. Get ready. What comes now could transform your next dawn. When the soul feels that it has been abandoned by God, even breathing becomes difficult. But there is a pain that is not so open, that does not scream, does not explode, and yet it consumes. It's the one that steals rest, that invades the early hours, that makes you roll over in bed with your mind racing, reliving mistakes, anticipating tragedies, trying to control what is beyond your reach. And the worst part? From the outside, everything seems normal. You get up, work, talk, but no one knows that. Inside, you are on the verge of collapse. The name of it? Anxiety. A prison without bars where the jailer is thought itself. But what if I told you there was a key? That Jesus reveals to you today a secret that freed a king and can free you? So take a deep breath, because this story could change your nights, and maybe even your entire life. It was night again. The torches were out. The palace was silent. The servants were collected, but David could not sleep. His eyes stared at the dark ceiling, and his mind swirled like an endless storm. He was king, yes, but nothing on the throne healed the heart. All around him, enemies were conspiring. Inside the house, there were betrayals. Inside his soul, guilt, pressure, and memories that wouldn't leave him alone. David was exhausted, but he couldn't rest. The body begged for rest, but the heart screamed with fear. This is the reality for many today. People who fight against the pillow, against the clock, against the head that won't turn off. Because anxiety is that subtle thief. It doesn't arrive with a scandal, but it devours everything in silence, especially sleep. And it was in this scenario that he wrote one of the most intense statements in the Bible. I lie down in peace, and then fall asleep, for only you, Lord, make me live in safety. But do you understand the weight of this? He was not in good times. He didn't write this from the comfort of victory. David prayed this prayer in the midst of chaos, in the midst of fear, in the midst of external battles and internal storms. And yet he declared, I will sleep, because I depend not on logic, but on presence. Jesus reveals to you that sleeping in peace is not a sign of control, but of surrender. And this is precisely where many fail, because they try to control everything before resting. They try to resolve every detail, foresee every possibility, eliminate every risk. But the problem is that those who try to control everything lose control of themselves. And anxiety arises precisely from this place, from the illusion that if you think hard enough, you will be able to prevent things from going wrong. But what if I told you that thinking too much is exactly what's making you sick? Anxiety is a prison set up in your mind, and it feeds on three things: what has already happened, what hasn't happened yet, and what you think you need to avoid. Meanwhile, Jesus invites you to rest in the now, to be delivered, to trust, because sleeping is an act of faith. It's declaring, I can't do anything else today, so I put everything in his hands. David, even with the army looking for him, even with a broken heart, even with the guilt of past mistakes, lay down and slept, because he understood a spiritual key. Sleep does not come when everything is resolved. It comes when you decide to rest in the one who governs everything. Now be honest. How many nights have you wasted trying to predict tomorrow? How? Many times has your body laid down, but your soul remains awake, rehearsing arguments, reliving failures, worrying about what hasn't even arrived. What if I told you that perhaps the greatest sin is not what you did, but the faith you didn't give? Because Jesus reveals it to you. The anxiety that dominates you today is, in fact, a place where God still does not have access. And until you let go, you won't rest. But be careful. This is the point where many will be offended, because they will say, it's not a lack of faith, it's clinical anxiety. But stop and reflect. Is everything an illness? Or is there spiritual pain being treated as emotional disorders? I'm not here to invalidate the treatment, but to remind you of something that the world doesn't talk about. There are wounds of the soul that no medicine can touch, and no sleep comes back until the heart is completely surrendered. You can take whatever, but if fear still dominates your interior, rest will never be complete. And now, in all sincerity, I invite you to do something bold. Comment now without fear of judgment. I decide to give my anxiety to Jesus. Because this comment could be your first step towards sleeping peacefully after so long. Don't type just to type. Write if this word confronted you. If you saw yourself in that dark room, in that accelerated thought, in that night battle. And share this message with someone who keeps saying they are tired, but who perhaps is actually imprisoned by their mind. Be a channel of liberation today. Jesus reveals to you that true peace does not depend on what is happening around you, but on what is established within you. And he's saying now, surrender, lay down, I'll take care of it, just like that. It's not easy, but it's simple. And it's exactly the moment you refuse to keep trying to control everything that heaven comes into play. But don't think that the night fight is the only prison that prevents progress. There is a pain that, unlike anxiety, does not steal the future, but paralyzes the present. A pain that doesn't stop you from sleeping, but from living, and it's called guilt. And what happened to one of Jesus's closest disciples may reveal a path to redemption you never imagined. Get ready. What comes now will confront what you believe about forgiveness. Anxiety steals sleep, yes, but there is something even more paralyzing than sleepless nights. It is the invisible burden of guilt. He who accompanies you during the day suffocates you at night, and silences your voice even when you want to pray. It's a pain that no one sees, but that contaminates everything. Your relationships, your choices, the way you see yourself. And the cruelest thing is that many believe that after making mistakes, they will never be worthy of starting over. But what if I told you that Jesus not only saw your error, but has already prepared your restoration? Jesus reveals to you now how a man broken by his own failure was raised up by a love that the world would not understand. And this revelation can heal what still accuses you. The day was already light when he heard that question for the third time. Do you love me? But it wasn't just a question. It was a wound being touched, a memory being exposed, a guilt being brought to the surface. It was Jesus looking at Peter with eyes that did not accuse, but demanded truth. It was as if he said, I know what you did, but I want to know if you still love me despite it. Pedro didn't cry when the rooster crowed. He didn't scream when Jesus was arrested. But now that grace hits him head on, he can't hold back his tears. Because there is nothing more violent than being forgiven when you still blame yourself. You know the story. Peter had sworn eternal fidelity. Even if everyone abandons you, I never will. He spoke with conviction, with emotion, with sincere love, but all it took was the fear, the chaos, the pressure, and he denied it. Not one, not two, 3 times. He even denied it angrily. He denied it as if he had never walked alongside the Master. And when the rooster crowed, reality tore him apart. He betrayed the one he loved most. He failed the one who trusted him most. And now, even with the resurrection of Christ before him, Peter's soul was still trapped in error. How? Many people live like this. They know that Jesus is resurrected. They know that grace is real. They know that forgiveness exists, but they cannot forgive themselves. They carry a past that has become current, a mistake that became an identity. And even when God opens a new door, they sabotage themselves because they believe they no longer deserve to be used, healed, or lifted up. Jesus reveals to you, it is not you who defines your dignity. It's Him. And if He said, "Feed my sheep," it's because He has already erased what you still repeat. But let's be honest. Do you really believe in forgiveness? Or are you just pretending to? Because there is a type of faith that lives with one foot in guilt. It is the Christian who praises, prays, fasts, but still punishes himself internally. Who helps others, but never thinks he deserves God's help. And that is not humility. That's hurt pride. It is the illusion that your mistake was greater than the cross. And if this confronts you, it is because perhaps there is still a part of you stuck in the moment of your own rooster crowing. Peter, even after the resurrection, went back to fishing. He returned to his old trade, perhaps because he felt he was no longer worthy of being an apostle, maybe because he thought his calling was over. But Jesus went to him, again, in the same setting where I had called him for the first time, by the sea with a fire lit, bread on the coals, fish being served. It was as if Jesus said, "Let's start over." And that changes everything, because Jesus reveals to you that restoration doesn't just happen at the altar. Sometimes it happens in everyday life, in the same place where you got lost. Peter was restored, yes, but not on merit, for love. Because Jesus' love doesn't ignore your mistakes. He turns them into bridges to His calling. Jesus didn't say, "I forgive you, so go tend my sheep." He said, "Do you love me? Then feed." Forgiveness came with the mission. Because for Jesus, your past doesn't cancel your purpose. It prepares you to fulfill your calling with more grace. And now, I need to ask you something that may sound harsh. Is the guilt you feel really regret, or an excuse to continue punishing yourself? Have you ever asked Jesus for forgiveness, but haven't forgiven yourself because, deep down, you think you need to suffer more? That He needs to pay for everything He did? But who told you that the cross was insufficient? That His blood didn't cover everything? Comment now, with truth and vulnerability. My past does not define my calling. Write this if that word exposed an old guilt that still paralyzes you. Write if you have ever felt like Peter, saved but still ashamed. And click like if this message healed you, even by a millimeter. Make this click an act of faith and share with someone who keeps saying, "I'm no good, I'm not worthy, there's no way for me anymore." Because maybe that person is like Peter, needing to hear the same question from Jesus 3 times, not to be embarrassed, but to be sent back. Jesus reveals to you that your failure is not the end of your story. In fact, it may be the chapter that most glorifies grace. But what if I told you that there is still a deeper pain, a wound that comes not from what you did, but from what you believe others would do if they knew your truth? Get ready, because the next moment exposes the most silent fear of the human soul, that of becoming a burden to those you love. And the story to come may be its most honest mirror yet. The guilt is cruel, but there is an even quieter pain, the fear of being discovered, not because of what you show, but because of what you hide. It's the thought that if someone knew everything that goes through your mind, everything you've ever done, everything you feel, they would walk away. It's the fear of being completely seen and completely rejected. And if this touches you, take a deep breath, because Jesus reveals a story that disarms any fear of exposure. A woman marked by scandals, rejected by society, and condemned by religion was precisely the one chosen by Jesus to reveal one of the deepest truths of faith. Get ready. This encounter not only transformed her life, it could liberate yours. The sun was at its highest point, midday, the hottest time, the time when no one, absolutely no one, would go to fetch water. And that was exactly the time she chose, not by chance, but out of fear, scared of meeting someone, fear of crooked looks, fear of whispers, fear of rejection. She had already been talked about too much, and those who are talked about a lot learn to hide. The Samaritan woman went to the well at an inappropriate time because she actually felt that she herself was unfit. 5 broken relationships. A 6th man she lived with, but was not her husband. She was no longer looking for love, she was just surviving. And inside, she had already convinced herself that she would never be seen with dignity again. But on that day, in that heat, Jesus reveals to you that it was precisely there that he decided to find her. And what he did was completely unexpected. He didn't point, he didn't accuse, he didn't move away. He asked for water. Yes, Jesus put himself in a position of need. It was as if he said, "You are not a burden. You have something to offer me." That disarmed the woman, because no one saw her like that. She was the mistake of the city, the scandal of the street corners. But Jesus looked at her with truth and tenderness, and he said, "If you knew who was asking you for water, you would be the one who would ask him, and he would give you living water." Maybe you've already felt this way, like someone who needs to hide to avoid getting in the way, that you need to pretend you're fine so you don't get discarded, that you need to silence your pain so as not to appear too needy. And perhaps, until today, you have lived like this, on the defensive, as if the whole world was about to abandon you. But Jesus reveals to you, it is not you who are too heavy. It is the human heart that is too shallow to bear depths that only God understands. The Samaritan woman was not just seen, it was revealed. Jesus said exactly everything she had already done. No contempt, no irony, no surprise. He exposed his truth as naturally as the sunrise reveals itself. Because the truth that Jesus shows is always to heal, never to shame. She was so shocked that she ran into the city shouting, "Come, see a man who told me everything I have done." Think about it. She who hid now exposes her past. Shame became testimony. The pain became a voice. Loneliness became purpose. And all this because she was seen, full view. How many people today live in relationships based on the fear of being discovered? Marriages where one doesn't really know the other. Superficial friendships. Ministries supported by appearance. People who preach about grace but hide sins for fear of rejection. What if I told you that hiding is more tiring than making mistakes? That pretending to be a perfection that you don't have takes you away from Jesus much more than the error itself? Jesus reveals you. You are only healed to the extent that you allow yourself to be revealed. And now, with all the courage within you, comment, "I am not a burden. Jesus sees me and calls me." Write this not out of obligation, but if in fact, this message exposed what you have been trying to hide. Write if you've ever felt like this woman. Used, discarded, ignored. Write if you have ever been defined by your mistakes and not by your essence. Because today, Jesus not only sees you, he calls you, not despite your past, but with it, because he transforms your baggage into a mission. And share this video with someone who lives in fear of being rejected, someone who isolates themselves, who avoids opening up, who has gotten used to not being seen. You may think, that person will never change. But what if you are the channel for her to hear today that Jesus sees her completely and still calls her? Do it, not for you, but because someone needs this truth now. Jesus reveals to you that whoever he calls, he heals, and whoever he heals, he sends. But the wounded soul's journey doesn't stop there. There is something subtler, more everyday, but equally devastating. A mind that won't stop, a restless heart, thoughts that don't stop, anxiety disguised as productivity, faith suffocated by responsibilities. And a woman named Marta will show you that even those who serve Jesus can be distracted from him. What you will discover next could change the way you live your faith forever. But there is a silent pain that many carry and few can explain. A constant restlessness, a mental fatigue that cannot be cured with physical rest, an internal war that no one sees, but that steals peace, exhausts the soul, and sabotages even the most sincere prayers. And the most shocking thing is that even praying, seeking, trying to trust, it seems that the mind never turns off. Racing thoughts, incessant worries, fear of what hasn't even happened yet. And it is in this invisible chaos that many lose. the ability to hear God's voice. But what if I told you that Jesus knows your every thought, even the ones you'd like to forget? What if the solution isn't control, but surrender? Martha wasn't doing anything wrong. She was serving, taking care of the house, concerned with every detail to receive Jesus with excellence. But even though she was in his presence, her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't stop. I couldn't silence it. I just couldn't be. While her sister Maria sat at the Master's feet, Martha was shaken, physically and emotionally. And it was in this contrast that Jesus spoke words that echo to this day in the minds of so many who cannot rest. Martha, Martha, you are restless and worry about many things. How many of us are Martha every day? Trying to do everything right, trying to control everything around us, overwhelmed, but without realizing that we are missing what is essential. The mind screams, the heart weighs, and even in the presence of Jesus, the soul remains restless. Have you ever felt this way? As if your mind doesn't have a pause button? As if thoughts never leave you alone, not even during prayer? And when everything around you finally goes silent, that's when the internal noise gets louder. There are mental lists, worries about the future, fears about what could go wrong, emotional demands that accumulate and explode in the form of anxiety. And the cruelest thing is that on the outside you seem fine. Nobody sees this invisible war. No one realizes how difficult it is to keep faith when the mind doesn't cooperate. Is this a lack of faith, or is there something deeper going on? Jesus did not rebuke Martha for doing too much, but for being concerned too much. He saw the root of her anxiety, and he sees yours too. Jesus doesn't want you to just be productive. He wants you to be whole. It wants your presence, your attention, your surrender. He is not asking you to solve everything. He just wants you to sit at his feet and entrust. May you stop, breathe, and allow the peace that passes all understanding to fill the void that worry has created. Anxiety is not a sign of spiritual weakness. It is an internal alarm that your soul needs rest in God. Mary chose the best part, not because she did less, but because she prioritized what was eternal. Have you been choosing the best part? Or have you been getting lost in excessive obligations and uncontrolled thoughts? What if your restless mind is being used by God to draw you closer? What if he is showing you that the time has come to stop fighting in your own strength and simply rest? Because it's not about stopping thinking. It's about where your mind rests. And when she rests in Christ, the internal chaos begins to fall silent. But that choice is yours. You can keep trying to control everything, or you can give in and say, Jesus, I can't take it anymore. Teach me to rest in you. Because it is at his feet that the mind calms down, that fears lose their strength, and that peace becomes more real than any destructive thought. Maybe what's killing you isn't the problem itself, but the way your mind has been dealing with it. Now stop for a second, breathe, close your eyes. Imagine Jesus calling you by name, as he did with Martha. Imagine him looking you in the eye and saying, you are restless and worried about many things, but only one is necessary. That one thing is him. Not what you do for him, but the time you spend with him. That's where healing begins. And no matter how many messed up thoughts are in there, Jesus' voice is louder, stronger, sweeter. She calms down, she heals, she frees. If this message spoke to you, write in the comments, Jesus, silence my mind. Do you believe that your mental fatigue is just a lack of faith? Or have you realized that what you need most is not control, but surrender? That's not all. There is a pain that gnaws away in silence, a feeling that many dare not confess, that of having been forgotten by God. When prayers don't seem to reach the ceiling, when time passes and nothing changes, when even those who promised to be by your side turn their faces away. And it is in this silence that the soul screams for help, but no one hears. The question that echoes is devastating. Has God forgotten me? Get ready, because what you will hear now may break this cycle of abandonment and remind you of something that all of heaven has never stopped knowing. You have never been out of reach of Jesus' eyes, 38 years. That was how long that man was on the sidelines, on the edge of healing, on the edge of hope, apart from other people's priorities. 38 long years waiting for a miracle that never came. And the scene is brutally human. A pool of Bethesda, churning waters, a mystical promise of healing, and a crowd of sick people fighting to be first. A system where only the fastest, strongest, or most helped get the blessing. But what about those who have no one? Who carries not only the pain of illness, but also the wound of forgetfulness? That paralytic was there every day, surrounded by people who also suffered, but he still felt alone. And when Jesus approaches, he doesn't just see the body lying down. He sees the crushed soul. The first question Jesus asks is disconcerting. Do you want to be healed? Isn't it obvious? Not for Jesus. Because there are pains that, when they last for a long time, make the person stop believing that they can be restored. Sometimes pain becomes identity, and the lack of answers becomes a belief. I was forgotten. And you have. You ever felt this way? As if your pain was invisible even to God. As if heaven had other priorities and you were just one of the crowd? How many times have you seen people around you being healed, blessed, celebrated, while you remain there, in the same place, waiting for someone to help you move an inch towards the miracle? Do you really believe that Jesus has forgotten you? Or is he seeing you in a way that you don't yet understand? Jesus did not wait for that man to move. He required no effort, no merit, not even a single step. He just said, "Get up, take up your bed and walk." What this man expected from a man, help to get to the water, Jesus offered in a supernatural way, healing without intermediation. Because when Jesus enters the scene, he does not bow to the logic of human systems. He doesn't need a ladder, tank, or queue. He just needs a soul willing to answer, "I want to." You may have been forgotten by people. It may have been left aside by churches, by friends, by the family itself. But Jesus reveals to you, you never left heaven's radar. The pain of waiting is not the absence of God. It is the preparation for a manifestation where he will be the only explanation. Jesus didn't arrive when that man wanted. He arrived when no one else expected it, when everything seemed routine, when hope was just a bitter habit. And it was there that the miracle manifested itself, not with fanfare, but with authority. What if I told you that your pot of Bethesda is precisely that time when you think nothing is happening? What if, in fact, Jesus is already on your side right now, ready to say, "Get up"? Do you really believe that God's silence is forgetfulness? Or is it a divine strategy so that when he speaks, no one dares to say it was luck or coincidence? Get up. That word still has power. Arise from guilt, doubt, bitter waiting, spiritual victimism. Take your story in your hands. Yes, even your bed of pain. And walk. Walk with what paralyzed you. Jesus did not take away the man's bed. He made it a testimony. What was a symbol of pain was now carried as proof of healing, because that's how he does it. He turns the scar into preaching, paralysis in testimony, silence in revelation. If this word confronted you, write in the comments, "Jesus, I refuse to live forgotten." Do you really believe that God has forgotten you? Or have you stopped believing that you can still be remembered? But wait. What if the most dangerous pain is not abandonment, but the feeling of living automatically, without purpose, day after day? What comes next may awaken you from a state that silently destroys millions of souls, and when the problem is not abandonment, nor anxiety, nor even loneliness, what if the most dangerous pain is the one you no longer feel, because you've become accustomed to it? There is something even more devastating than suffering. It is not feeling anything anymore. It's living. Automatically. Wake up, do what you have to do, sleep, and repeat. Like a spiritual robot, performing soulless functions. Maybe you pray, but without presence. Maybe I'll go to church, but without expectations. Maybe it lives, but without life. And that's when the emptiness becomes so dense that it swallows even faith. What to do when you complete all the rituals, but feel like you are dying inside? Solomon had everything: wisdom, wealth, power, influence, pleasures, recognition. But at the end of his days, the wisest man in human history writes an empty cry that spans centuries. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. It wasn't just any outburst. It was a profound conclusion from someone who lived intensely, and yet ended the cycle feeling that none of it really fulfilled anything. It's like saying, I've experienced everything the world has to offer, and yet I'm empty. The shock? This cry does not come from a failed man. It comes from someone who seemingly won in every area, but lost himself. Solomon is the portrait of someone who lives in performance, who gets involved with projects, builds, serves, leads, generates results, but forgets to cultivate presence. And when the presence of God becomes a detail and not the center, the heart goes into automatic mode. You wake up, do the devotional, listen to praise, respond to messages, but all of this without depth, without soul, like a shallow, wide river, beautiful to the eye, but unable to quench the thirst of those who dive. Have you ever felt this? As if everything that moved you before today just went unnoticed. The automatic emptiness is cruel, because he doesn't scream, he whispers. And as time passes, you begin to conform to this kind of shallow life. You get used to spiritual superficiality. Learn to talk about Jesus without listening to Jesus. Learn to teach about faith without living faith. He learns to sing about restoration, while inside, everything remains broken. The most dangerous thing is that, to others, you look good, you work, you deliver, but his soul is suspended, as if something vital has been turned off inside. You don't cry anymore, don't dream anymore. You don't allow yourself to feel, because you're afraid of realizing how far you are from where you should be. Jesus reveals to you, the greatest spiritual attack today is not external persecution. It is the numbness of the soul. It is the exchange of the supernatural for the convenient. It's living religiously correct, but spiritually absent. When Solomon declared that all was vanity, he was not saying that all was useless. He was saying that all was insufficient without God. And perhaps your emptiness today is not a lack of productivity, but a lack of intimacy, because nothing you do will fill what only the presence of Jesus can inhabit. What if you stopped right now, took a deep breath, and faced this truth, that you became excellent at living for God, but forgot to live with God? Because the difference is brutal. Living for God may be noble, but living with Him is what heals. The automatic is only broken when there is a divine interruption. When Jesus enters the dark room of your soul, He turns on the light and says, I am here. Come back. Feel it again. Listen again. Wish again. Return to live. Today, perhaps you need to do what Solomon only did at the end. Recognize that without presence, everything is empty. Without eternity in focus, everything is illusion. Without the voice of the Spirit, all activity becomes noise. It's not about doing more. It's about returning to your first love. Because automaticity is not just a way of life. It is a symptom of a soul that has stopped expecting something new from God. And that is the beginning of the end of living faith. But there is still time. You can still be interrupted. Jesus is still knocking, not on the door of your agenda, but on the door of your heart. And if you open, even that emptiness will be redeemed. Because when the presence returns, even silence becomes worship. Even rest becomes a mission. Even tears become altars. It's not too late to get out of automatic mode and start living meaningfully again. If this word revealed what you have been feeling, write in the comments, Jesus, take me off automatic. Do you really believe you are living, or just learning to survive spiritually? But what comes now may shake your heart even more. Because, what if you're trying to believe but your faith is exhausted? What if your soul wants to trust but can't anymore? What Jesus did in this next story will show you that even weak faith can lead to miracles. And when the heart still desires to believe, but the soul is too tired to sustain faith, there is a pain that cannot be seen and that many do not admit, the weakening of faith. It's not rebellious unbelief, it's spiritual exhaustion. It's being between I believe and I can't take it anymore. It's that moment when you want to trust, but you can't feel anymore. When you still talk to God, but you no longer expect a response. When you pray out of obligation, not out of hope. This battle between faith and weakness is not a sin. She's human. and Jesus reveals it to you. Even this silent conflict has a place in his arms. The crowd tightens. Shouting, confusion, Pharisees arguing, disciples trying to explain what they couldn't resolve. In the midst of that tumultuous scene, a father appears, desperate. His son, taken by an unclean spirit, convulses, foaming at the mouth, thrown to the ground, exposed to the mockery and fear of looks. This father, before coming to Jesus, had already sought help everywhere. Doctors, masters, disciples. Nothing worked. Now, faced with the Messiah himself, he no longer had the strength to simulate optimism. When Jesus says that all things are possible to him who believes, the Father's response is not a triumphant declaration of faith. It is a broken cry of weakness. I believe, help me in my unbelief. It is in this phrase that thousands of hearts fit today. Between wanting to believe and no longer being able to sustain faith. Between Jesus can and but it hasn't worked for me. Between promise and silence. Between the altar and doubt. How many times have you said, even if only inside, I believe, but there is a part of me that is tired, hurt, suspicious. And the most incredible thing? Jesus did not reject that father. He did not require him to fix his faith before performing the miracle. He healed the boy anyway. Because faith doesn't have to be perfect. You need to be sincere. Jesus reveals to you. He does not expect you to have unshakable faith all the time. He responds to real faith, even when it comes with cracks. Because when you approach him saying, help me, that is already faith. Even if it seems small, even if it comes mixed with pain, heaven responds to the heart that does not pretend. But what if your struggle today is not with the problem itself, but with the faith that was lost in the process? You pray, but you feel hypocritical. You sing, but inside, you no longer believe that the lyrics of the song apply to you. Have you ever wondered if your biggest challenge is not God acting, but you being able to wait until he acts? And in that place, guilt begins to scream, is my faith too weak? Is that why God doesn't respond? The story of the father of the possessed boy takes you apart and rebuilds you, because it shows that Jesus is not driven by performance. He is moved by truth. And if your truth today is, Lord, I can't pray about this anymore. Lord, I want to trust, but I'm afraid of getting frustrated again, then that truth is enough for him to embrace you. The miracle did not come after that man became strong. It came while he was still confessing his weakness. Because faith is not the absence of doubt. It is continuing to draw closer to God, even with a broken heart. How many who are watching now are experiencing this tension? Going to church, reading the Bible, doing everything right, but with an exhausted soul, with an amen on the tongue but a why in the chest. This is the time when many give up. This is the time when many remain silent. But this is also the time when Jesus arrives. And he doesn't come with charges. Come with compassion. He leans down to your confusion and holds out his hand. Because before demanding faith, he offers, yes, maybe today you can only say, help me, and that help me is enough to touch the sky. Because Jesus not only heals the boy, he heals the father too. He restores shattered faith, returns the ability to believe, rekindles the spark that despair almost extinguished. And he wants to do this with you now. If this word opened your soul wide open, write boldly in the comments, Jesus, help my unbelief. Do you really believe that your faith is too small? Or is it that what Jesus is waiting for is your sincerity, not your strength? But what happened next goes even deeper, because there are times when the problem is no longer sin nor weakness. It is the fact that we have learned to live with masks. Get ready, the next block will expose something that many people experience, but few have the courage to admit. And when the problem is not what you feel, but what you need to hide to continue surviving, there are pains that cannot be exposed, weaknesses that, if revealed, would threaten the entire image you have built. And that is why so many people today live behind spiritual masks. Well, he preaches, he smiles, but he bleeds inside. It's the kind of pain that even hides from God, as if that were possible. and Jesus reveals it to you. Behind the forced strength, there is often a soul begging to be seen, not as a leader, intercessor, or reference, but just as a tired son who just wanted to collapse into the Father's arms. Samson was no longer the same. The man who once killed 1,000 men with a jawbone, who tore a lion apart with his bare hands, was now blind, tied up, publicly humiliated. But the deepest pain wasn't physical. It was internal. It was the silence of God. It was the echo of wrong choices. It was the memory of the broken alliance. Samson represented more than a defeated warrior. He was the portrait of a soul that got used to appearing strong, even when everything was already falling apart inside. And perhaps the most frightening thing is this: he continued operating, overcoming, serving, even as he moved away from the center of God's will, until the day everything fell apart. And then, the mask had nowhere else to hide. How many people today are experiencing exactly this drama? Pretending to be strong so as not to disappoint, using language of faith to hide emotional breakdown, producing fruit while the inside withers. You've become good at hiding the truth. Maybe you even advise others, pray for those who cry, but you don't have the courage to admit what's going on inside you, because your reputation has become your prison, and the fear of being seen as weak stopped you from being cured in truth. Are you living behind armor that Jesus never asked you to wear? Samson asked for strength, but not just any force. He did not ask for a new mission. He didn't ask for the throne. He just asked to be remembered. Because the most devastating pain for those who live with a mask is this: the feeling that God has also forgotten his essence, that he only cares about your function, your role, your delivery. But Jesus reveals it to you. He is not impressed by your appearance. He sees what no one else sees and loves right there, in weakness, in vulnerability, in the secret place where you almost don't recognize yourself anymore. Maybe you are a modern-day Samson. He won many battles. It impacted lives. But now you're blind, trapped by things you let in yourself, tied to emotional addictions, dominated by internal voices. You feel like you have failed too much to be restored. But even blind, even chained, Samson still prayed. And that was enough. Because when prayer comes from the depths of the abyss, God does not demand performance. He only responds with presence. Samson did not end up a perfect hero, but it ended up restored. Because in the end, he had the courage to say, "Remember me." And you? Do you have the courage to be remembered as you really are? To let Jesus see what is behind your appearance of strength? Because what makes you sick isn't your weakness. It's pretending it doesn't exist. The miracle you expect may be blocked precisely because you are trying to be too strong to deserve it. And Jesus doesn't respond to perfection. He responds to surrender. This is a call to take off the mask, to stop pretending everything is okay, to say, like Samson, "Lord, just one more time, see me as I am. Give me strength, not to impress, but to return." Because you were not created to represent a spirituality. You were created to live an intimacy. And if today all you can do is fall on your knees and say, "Remember me," that is the beginning of your turnaround. If this message exposed you from within, comment now sincerely, "Jesus, I don't want to live with masks anymore." Do you really think hiding your pain will protect your faith? Or have you realized that the only path to healing begins with exposure? But that's not all. There is an even more silent pain, a fear that paralyzes the soul, the fear of being judged. And what Jesus did with a woman cornered by the public eye will show you that human judgment never overcomes divine grace. Prepare yourself for the next spiritual shock. While many people are still trying to appear strong in public, there is a much deeper pain that almost no one dares to admit: spiritual silence. It's not just about feeling alone. It's about feeling like not even the sky moves for you. Pedro went through this too. Imagine the weight of carrying a promise, of walking with Christ himself, of seeing miracles, and yet knowing that, inside, something is about to fall apart. Few talk about it. Few have the courage to admit, "I feel like no one is praying for me." The truth is that there are times when the soul enters a valley so dark that not even the cry seems to reach the heavens. And in these moments, the absence of intercession hurts like an invisible knife. Peter had not yet fallen. He still hadn't denied it. But Jesus, with eyes that see beyond weakness, revealed something powerful. I have prayed for you, that your faith may not fail. Do you understand the weight of this? Jesus did not pray that Peter would not fall. He prayed that even after the fall, his faith would not die. This changes everything, because maybe you're waiting for someone to pray to free you from the pain. But Jesus is interceding so that, even when going through pain, it does not kill your faith. What he sees in you is deeper than what you see in yourself. And perhaps, in the silence of your spiritual life, you have believed that no one is supporting you in prayer. But what if I told you that the Son of God is right now, before the Father interceding for you, that he mentions your name, even when you can no longer cry out? Many Christians live as if they were spiritually orphans, as if the absence of prayer from others was proof that they were forgotten. But Jesus reveals to you today a disconcerting truth. The most powerful intercession in the universe does not come from earth, but from heaven to heaven. When everyone forgets you, Jesus remembers. When no one mentions his name, he whispers it in intercession. The greatest prayer is not said by a pastor, a leader, or a relative. The greatest prayer is written in eternity, when Christ, even before your fall, was already crying out for your faith to survive. Now answer me with brutal honesty. Do you really believe that you are spiritually alone? Or are you afraid to believe that no one cares about your salvation? Comment now. Jesus, thank you for praying for me when I didn't even believe anymore. This statement is more than a comment. It is a break with the lie of spiritual loneliness. And if you've made it this far, it's not by chance, because maybe you need to not only hear this truth, but share it. Click like as a leap of faith. It's not just a button, it's a ring. One way to say, I know Jesus didn't give up on me. Share this word with someone who seems to be failing in faith. You can be the channel of intercession that Jesus wants to use. But there is an even more silent pain that many hide. The tiredness of trying to be strong, of trying to change, of trying to get it right. The next moment is for those who keep trying, but only collect failures. And what Jesus reveals there will deconstruct everything you were taught about effort and merit. No matter how hard we try, there are cycles that never seem to break. It's like you put in all the effort, all the faith, all the tears, and still failed again. The frustration of trying to be better, of trying to overcome a sin, of trying to maintain focus, discipline, a pure heart, and finding yourself once again broken on the floor. This pain is more common than you might think, but it is rarely confessed, because the evangelical world often idolizes the winners, but silences those who stumble. And if you feel ashamed of continuing to try and fail, know that you are closer to Paulo than you realize. Imagine the Apostle Paul, this giant of faith, responsible for taking the gospel to the Gentiles, for founding churches, for resisting arrests, floggings, shipwrecks. Now imagine this same man begging God 3 times to get rid of something that deeply troubled him, a thorn. We don't know if it was an illness, a temptation, an emotional pain, but we know it was something that hurt him deeply. And the most shocking thing, God didn't take it away. Contrary to what one expects, the Lord responded with something disconcerting. My grace is sufficient for you. For many, this may sound like resignation. But for those who understand the spiritual dimension of this response, it is a revelation of power. Jesus reveals to you that his presence is more powerful than the absence of pain. Maybe you are trying to overcome an addiction, rebuild your dignity, rescue your faith, and the more you try, the more you seem to fail. And this is where the question no one wants to face arises. Are you trying to win by effort and not by grace? This question divides opinions, confronts doctrines, and unmasks a subtle pride, believing that you can save yourself with your own strength. But Jesus reveals it to you today. It is in your weakness that he manifests his power. It's when you can't do it anymore, when your attempt fails, when your mind screams, enough, that he whispers, now let me be strong for you. What Paul experienced was a reversal of logic. The pain he asked to leave was exactly the place where God decided to manifest himself. And this destroys the lie that those who still suffer are spiritually weak. In fact, there is a hidden anointing in the persistent pain, the grace that sustains and not just liberates, the grace that turns failure into testimony, the grace that lifts, even when everything is still hurting. And maybe you need to hear this. Jesus is not waiting for you to win to love you. He is with you while you still lose. His glory does not come after your victory, but shines precisely in the midst of your war. Now take a deep breath. Let this word enter your spirit. Have you ever wondered why you're still standing, even after so many falls? This is no coincidence. That's grace. It's Jesus holding your hand, even when your strength is gone. Maybe the prayer you should pray today is not "God, deliver me from this," but "God, reveal to me your power right here." This is the prayer that changes everything. That takes the focus off your performance and puts the focus on His presence. This is what Jesus reveals to you today. He did not come to praise the strong. He came to restore the weak. And now, a challenge that will provoke many people. Do you really trust in God? Or do you just trust in your ability to please Him? If this question confronted you, comment now. I accept grace, even though I don't deserve it. And don't think it's just another comment. It's an act of faith. It's the moment when you break the weight of performance and throw yourself into the lap of a Father who loves you without conditions. But wait, what if I told you that there is a type of pain that is even more silent, more hidden, that eats away at the inside without producing a sound? It's the kind of pain that no one sees because it's not expressed with tears, but with silence. The next block will reveal how God speaks even when you can no longer say a single word. Prepare to dive into an emotional cave where only the whisper of Jesus can reach. After so many frustrated attempts to change, to overcome pain, and to keep faith standing, there remains something that many cannot even explain: the silence that hurts. Not the external silence, but the internal one, the one that consumes you inside, that isolates you even from yourself. It's the kind of silence that no one notices because on the outside, everything seems stable. But inside, the scream that doesn't come out traps the soul. And what to do when what you feel has no words? When you can no longer pray, nor vent, nor explain? When do you start to wonder if even God has stopped listening? Elijah, the great prophet, was also silent. After performing one of the greatest miracles on record, causing fire to fall from the sky, he collapsed. Fireworks on the altar, yes, but a desert within the soul, and that's exactly where most people don't understand. How could a man so used by God reach the point of wanting to die? How can someone so full of anointing enter an emotional cave? Elijah runs away. Go to the desert. And when God asks, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" he does not respond with confidence. He doesn't say, "I'm fine," nor does he try to appear strong. He pours out what remains, a speech choked with loneliness, frustration, and spiritual weight. And after that, silence. And it is precisely there, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a dark and cold cave, that something supernatural happens. God does not come in a strong wind, not even in the earthquake, not even in the fire. God comes in a whisper. This changes everything, because this proves that heaven does not depend on our emotional volume. What Jesus reveals to you. His presence is not manifested in the height of your voice, but in the depth of your heart. How many times have you felt like you weren't praying enough, that your faith was weak because you couldn't talk to God like you used to? How many times have you blamed yourself for not being able to explain how you feel, neither to others nor to yourself? Jesus reveals something to you that can break this prison now. He doesn't expect beautiful phrases or structured prayers. He responds to silence, to the sigh, looking lost, to emotional stuckness. It moves just where you can't move. And the most powerful thing is to understand that it was in the quietest moment of Elijah's life that God whispered, and not to confront, but to comfort, to remember that there was still purpose, that the calling had not died, that the prophet was still loved even in the depths of the cave. And maybe this is your moment. Maybe you are living this emotional cave in silence, without being able to express it, without finding a reliable ear, without the courage to verbalize what destroys you inside. But what if I told you that this silence is not the end, but the exact place where Jesus wants to reveal himself to you? Have you ever wondered why, even though you can't pray, you still feel like something is keeping you alive? That's grace. That's Jesus. He understands what you have never been able to put into words. And now, he whispers, I'm here. I never left. Take a deep breath, close your eyes, and allow yourself to hear that whisper in the spirit. Because what comes from him does not require noise. It requires delivery. Now stop everything and answer with courage. Do you believe that God only manifests himself in moments of spiritual ecstasy? Or are you ready to recognize that he speaks, even in your silence? If this truth confronts you, comment now. Jesus, I need to hear you even when I can't speak. And if you feel that this word needs to reach someone who lives trapped in silence, share it, not just as a gesture, but as a mission. And what comes now is even deeper, because there are pains that don't just go away, they paralyze. There are moments when it's not just the voice that fails, it's hope. The next block will reveal how, when everything seems trapped, when life shows no apparent way out, the presence of Jesus manifests itself as supernatural liberation. And what he does goes beyond human logic. Are you ready to see the impossible become a path? Have you ever been at that point where everything around you seems trapped? When the winds of life push you towards a dead end and all you see ahead is an impossible sea to cross? When the past comes chasing you like Pharaoh in his chariot and the future seems unreachable, drowning under waters of uncertainty and fear? There are times when it is no longer a question of choice, but of survival. And it was exactly in this scenario that the people of Israel found themselves. The Red Sea in front, the army of Egypt behind, and a desert around them. No plan, no direction, no escape route, just panic, the scream, and soon after, the silence of someone who doesn't know what else to do. But it is at that exact moment, when despair has already taken over, that something absolutely surprising happens. Moses, pressed by the crowd and the threat, hears the voice of God, a voice that does not bring human strategies but a heavenly order. The Lord will fight for you and you will be silent. That's not what we expect to hear. It's not the kind of sentence that soothes the logical soul, but it is precisely the word that breaks the chaos. Because it reveals that the way out that you are looking for will not come from your strength, nor from your planning, nor from your desperation. It will come from the presence of a God who acts when you are silent. Jesus reveals to you, there are moments when the true miracle begins when you stop running and start trusting. Now think, with me, how many times have you tried to find a way out with your own hands? How many nights have you spent awake, planning solutions that never happened? How many times have you screamed for help, only to hear the echo of your own voice? What if I told you that the problem was never a lack of faith, but an excess of control? That the biggest barrier between you and the miracle may be precisely your constant attempt to resolve what only God can open? The truth is harsh, but necessary. Often, it is not oppression that paralyzes you, but your resistance to letting go of control. And that's where this disconcerting revelation comes in. When you are silent, God speaks. When you stop, God moves forward. In front of the Red Sea, there was no logic. There was no advance notice. There was no plan B. There was obedience. There was silence. And the instant humanity surrendered, divinity moved. The sea opened, but not before, only after silence. This forces us to confront a very common lie, that God only acts when you act. Jesus reveals the opposite to you. He acts when you trust, when you give up on your plan and give up the space for him to build a path where before there was only impossibility. Maybe this is your time to stop fighting with arm strength and start depending on the strength of your spirit. Perhaps you are facing a sea that no one can cross for you. But Jesus doesn't need bridges. He creates a path in the midst of the impossible. Now, I want you to be radically honest. Do you really believe that Jesus can open a way out? Or are you just trying to convince yourself of that so you don't fall apart? If this question confronts you, don't run away. Comment now. Jesus, I trust even without seeing the way out. And if that word exposed you, tore you up, showed you that what you call faith might just be camouflaged fear, then share this video with someone who also needs to hear that there is still a path where only the end can be seen. But that's still not all, because there is a pain that goes beyond seeing no way out. That's when, even after opening the path, you're still lost. Not because there is no road, but because he no longer sees any point in walking. What happens when the soul no longer wishes to continue even though the sea has opened? What Jesus reveals in the next moment will shake everything you believe about purpose, direction, and identity. And maybe, just maybe, this truth will lift you off the ground in ways you never imagined. There are moments when the pain is no longer about what happened, but about what no longer makes sense. The worst feeling isn't despair. It's emptiness. It's waking up and not knowing why. It's breathing and not feeling the reason. It's being alive, but emotionally disconnected. When everything around you keeps working, but inside you something has shut down. When praying seems useless, worshiping seems forced, and dreaming has become too tiring. This is the stage where many do not have the courage to admit that they are lost, without purpose, surviving on spiritual autopilot. It was in this state that Jonah sank, and not just at sea, but within yourself. Jonah's story goes far beyond a disobedient prophet. It is the portrait of someone who can no longer bear the weight of the call, of expectations, of life. Jonah doesn't just run away from God, he runs away from himself. He rushes from a mission that seems bigger than he can handle, and embarks on a journey of escape that takes him straight into the storm. But the deepest moment is not the raging sea. It's the darkness of the fish's belly. 3 days, 3 nights, inside something that wasn't death, but wasn't life either. A place where no one saw him, no one heard him, no one could reach out. But it was precisely there that God did what no one else could do. Jesus reveals it to you. There are places where only he can reach you, and sometimes you need to get to the bottom to discover the true beginning. Have you ever felt this way? Like you're emotionally engulfed by something you can't describe? As if you were inside a reality that paralyzes you, limits you, suffocates you? Jonas had no way out, but he had a sigh. And from that sigh, a prayer was born. A prayer without an audience. No rhetoric, no strength, but true. And it is this raw truth, born deep in pain, that made God respond, not with judgment, but with deliverance. Because Jesus does not respond to spiritual performances, he responds to surrender, to the brutal sincerity of someone who says, God, I don't know what to do anymore, but if the Lord still listens to me, meet me here. How many people today live like Jonah in the belly of the fish, apparently protected, but emotionally trapped? They are not drowned, but they are not free either. They are in transit, but they don't know their destination. They believe they are still loved by God, but they no longer feel the need to exist. And it is at this point that we need to pause and face a truth that no one likes to say out loud. You can be called by God and still lose the meaning of the journey, but that doesn't mean you've lost value. This means that Jesus is preparing a turnaround. Can you imagine the power of a God who listens to the voice of someone who is inside a fish at the bottom of the sea, without light, without a plan, without a route? This breaks all religious logic that preaches that God only responds to those on the altar. Jesus reveals to you, he hears the cry of those who are broken, hidden, ashamed, and on the verge of giving up. And more than that, he responds. And even more, he sends the unlikely as return transport, because God is like that. He even uses the belly of a fish to preserve someone from drowning in their own fate. Now tell me honestly, do you really believe you lost your purpose? Or did you just give up looking for it for fear of getting frustrated again? If this question took you out of yourself, comment now. Jesus, even from deep down, I want to hear you. And if this message found someone you love but who is visibly sinking inside, send it now. Not as content, but as rescue. And here comes something that no one expected. Because even after being rescued, even after a new chance, there are hearts that continue to bleed in silence. The pain that follows is not one of escape. It is one of resistance. It's the kind of suffering that drags on for years, hidden, unwanted, and misunderstood. And what Jesus does in this next story will shake everything you think about healing and faith. Get ready. What comes could be the beginning of your deepest restoration. There are pains that don't scream. They do not produce scandal, do not attract attention, and do not generate public empathy. These are pains that bleed in silence, that destroy little by little, that drain everything inside while outside life goes on. These are wounds that have no medical name or precise emotional diagnosis. The woman who had suffered from blood flow for 12 years knew this pain like no one else. While everyone was walking normally, she was constantly draining life, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and socially. Because at that time, hemorrhage was not just an illness. It was a sentence of exclusion, impurity, shame, rejection. And what makes this story even more brutal is the fact that she sought help, and no one could cure her. Not religion, not doctors, not society. How many people experience exactly this today? They bleed emotionally, but no one sees it. They slowly lose life, but everyone thinks everything is fine. They smile, work, serve, put on makeup, but inside, they scream. And the scream is so deep that it becomes silence. This woman was at that stage, a place where giving up seems easier than trying again, a place where the fear of frustration overcomes faith in a new beginning. But then she heard about Jesus, and there's something lit up, not certainty, but hope. Because Jesus reveals to you that sometimes it's not perfect faith that changes everything. It's the courage to try to touch, even if it's just the edges of the impossible. She slipped through the crowd, anonymous, impure, forbidden to touch anyone. But she didn't want to touch someone. She wanted to play he, and she knew if she just touched it, she would be healed. There was no proof. There was no guarantee. Just a kind of faith that is born from the depths of pain. A wounded faith, real, gross. And the instant his fingers found the hem of the cloak, the invisible manifested itself. The sky moved, the flow stopped, and Jesus stopped. This needs to be said with weight. Jesus stopped for someone everyone ignored. This deconstructs any belief that you need to be noticed to be reached. He doesn't heal you because he sees you. He heals you because he knows you. Jesus felt that virtue came out of him. He turned around, looked at the crowd, and asked, "Who touched me?" His disciples thought it was strange. They were in the middle of a crowd. But Jesus reveals to you a hauntingly beautiful truth. The touch of real pain is different from the touch of curiosity. There are crowds that approach but do not touch with faith. And there are broken, hidden, silenced people who touch and pull from the sky what no one else could release. When Jesus met that woman, he did not call her unclean. He didn't call her brave. He called her daughter. He restored what the flow stole: dignity, identity, value. Have you ever felt like you are bleeding emotionally and no one notices? Have you ever felt that your pain is too invisible even to those closest to you? That even in the midst of the church, in the midst of the family, in the midst of social networks, you continue to be just one more? This woman did not scream. She didn't ask for prayer. She didn't ask for attention. She just extended her hand, and that was enough for heaven to manifest. Jesus reveals to you that sometimes it's not about how much you scream. It's about how much you believe in the midst of silence. And if you believe, even if you are weak, even if you have no strength, even if you only have the tips of your fingers, the miracle is inevitable. Now take a deep breath and be brutally honest with yourself. Do you really want to be healed? Or have you gotten used to the pain because you're afraid of living without it? This question will divide comments. It will touch unresolved wounds. But if you feel that this word confronted you, right now in the comments, Jesus, touch the pain that no one sees. It's not just a sentence, it's an act of faith, one step into the crowd, a touch towards healing. And if this message brought to light a pain that you were trying to hide even from God, share it. Not as content, but as testimony in the process. Because maybe someone needs to hear that the blood has stopped flowing and the identity has started to be restored. But don't think that this is the end, because there is an even more cruel pain. It's not the pain of being bleeding. It's the pain of having stopped on the outside, but still being dead on the inside. The next moment will show you that even after the touch, it is possible to live, as if nothing had changed. And what Jesus does in this next story can reignite the extinguished fire in you. Get ready, because what's about to be revealed could be exactly what makes your heart burn again. But there is a pain that seems even more devastating than silent suffering. It is no longer the muffled cry of the soul, nor the invisible anguish of the bleeding heart. It is a type of inner death that occurs even when everything around is still breathing. It's the kind of pain that sets in not when something breaks, but when you've gotten used to the pieces. It's no longer about fighting despair. Now it's different. It's about living as if something inside you has given up. To keep smiling, answering messages, going to church, interacting with everyone. But inside, the heart no longer beats the same sound. The disciples on the road to Emmaus knew exactly this feeling. Their emptiness was not because of the absence of Jesus in them, but because of the apparent defeat of the purpose that once made them live. They walked. Yes, they were still standing, but the soul? That had already been left behind, along with the dream. The cross seemed to have killed more than the Messiah. She seemed to have killed hope. That's why the gospel describes that scene in disturbing detail. They were talking and arguing, but their eyes were as if prevented from recognizing Jesus. Doesn't that confront you? Jesus walked with them, spoke with them, heard their lament, but even so, they were unable to perceive his presence. Do you know why? Because when the heart has given up, the mind rejects even the possibility that the miracle is at its side. Jesus reveals something disconcerting to you here. Internal giving up is so strong that it can blind even the most vivid faith. They talked about Jesus without realizing they were talking with Jesus. They exposed their pain to the one who had already conquered death, but their grief was stronger than their faith. Frustration was more powerful than the memory of promises. And that's what destroys us inside, when the trauma of what didn't work overshadows everything that God has already said. They said, "We hoped that he would be the one to rescue Israel." They waited, passed, it ended, he finished. Don't wait any longer. They just walked to walk, as many today do, going to work, going to church, going to appointments. But inside, they've already delivered the points. And then something unbelievable happens. Jesus, who until then had been listening, begins to speak. He takes the scriptures, walks with them, explains everything, but still, they don't recognize him. Because his revelation does not happen just through understanding. Revelation happens in the breaking of bread, in gesture, in the moment of intimacy. It is when he comes in to be with them, sits down at the table, breaks bread, that their eyes are opened. It is not theology that heals a paralyzed heart. It's presence. It's a relationship. It's the breaking of bread. Jesus reveals to you a spiritual key here. It's not how much you know about him. It's how much you allow him to enter. And then comes the most extraordinary part of all. When he disappears from their sight, the disciples are not frustrated. On the contrary, they look at each other and say, "Didn't our hearts burn within us when he spoke to us along the way?" The flame was rekindled. What seemed dead burned again. What was in ashes now pulses like live coals. And this did not happen because of a great miracle, but because of presence. Jesus did not perform resurrections at that time. He did not make the sea part. He didn't cast out demons. He just walked and talked and broke bread, and that was enough to reignite the heart. Now close your eyes and allow yourself to be confronted. Are you not living, but have you spiritually given up inside? How many times have you physically moved forward, but your soul has already decided to stop? How many times have you participated, sang, served, smiled, but secretly prayed not to wake up again? There is a difference between living and existing, and maybe you are just existing. If this message spoke to you with love, if it lifted that tiredness that you pretend not to feel, comment now. Jesus, make my heart burn again. It's not just a comment, it's a prayer. It's a plea, it's a cry back to life. And if that flame started to rekindle inside, even if timidly, share this. Word with someone you know has already stopped inside. That drags on from day to day. Who dresses, works, interacts, but gave up without announcing it. Show that Jesus still walks with those who have lost hope. But wait, because what comes next goes beyond tiredness and giving up. There is something even deeper. When pain breaks identity, when you look in the mirror and you no longer know who you are, when the past, mistakes, traumas, and guilt have made you believe that you are too far to be reached. But what if I told you that Jesus is running right towards you? What will be revealed now could change everything. Get ready. Sometimes the greatest pain is not in what the world did to you, but in what you allowed to happen within yourself. He was the pride of the house, the son who was once full of dreams, surrounded by love, direction, purpose. But something inside him began to scream louder, a desire for independence, a hunger to experience the world. Maybe he just wanted to be free. Maybe he was tired of being who they expected him to be. And then, with a boldness full of arrogance, he asked for his inheritance while his father was still alive, an affront, a sign of rupture, and he left, fast, without looking back. And at first it seemed like I got it right. Parties, friends, banquets. The empty soul tried to convince itself that it was finally filled. But the more I tried, the more I fell. And when it was all over, money, pleasure, applause, what was left was him and the pigs. He, the son of a loving father, now desired the food of the dirty offspring. This is the silent pain of the spiritual identity crisis, when you look in the mirror and barely recognize who you have become. And maybe today, you are exactly like that, sitting among the wreckage of what you once were. Remembering when I prayed fervently, when I felt the presence of God even in the simple details of life. But now it seems like everything is lost. And it's not just the sin that hurts. It's the emptiness. It's the shame of knowing that you knew the way, and yet you chose to walk away. This is the pain that the enemy uses most to keep you paralyzed, the guilt of having walked away knowing who God is. But what the story of the prodigal son shows us is a truth that human pride struggles to accept. The father never stopped looking in the direction of the path you set out on. He always waited. Always. And when the son decided to return, still covered in dirt and shame, the father didn't wait for him to explain himself. He didn't demand elaborate apologies. He didn't send him to take a shower before receiving him. The text says that while he was still far away, his father saw him. Because the Father never took his eyes off you. Never. Maybe you need to hear this now with all the strength of your heart. Jesus is not waiting for you to come back perfect. He just wants you to come back. Because his love is not logical, it is scandalous. It's a love that runs towards you when no one else would believe in you. It is a love that embraces you before you even say, "Forgive me." And that's what transforms. The return is not to the same position. It is to something even deeper, the restoration of your spiritual identity. You are not the mistake you made. You are not the separation you lived. You are a son. You are a daughter. And Father, he's running now. But is that really it? Could it be that the only thing that separates you from total restoration is the pride of not wanting to return humiliated? Is your shame greater than the love of Jesus? Careful. Because sometimes pride disguised as pain is what takes you the furthest from healing. What if today Jesus were saying to you, "Just go back. I'll take care of the rest"? Would you have the courage? Take a deep breath. Allow yourself to feel. Because this reunion with the Father is what your soul has been silently begging for so long. Close your eyes now and see, he is running to you. If this message spoke to your soul, write in the comments, "I come back today. Jesus welcomes me." Or does your pride still stop you from taking this step? But that's not all. What Jesus does with those who doubt themselves after they've already returned is even more surprising than the reunion. Because there is something even deeper than the return. It is what he reveals about your identity after the fall. And when you understand that, everything will change. You've come this far, not by chance. Every tear held back, every silent scream, of your soul, every void that no one has ever noticed. Jesus saw it all. And even when you thought you were forgotten, ignored, alone, he was there, observing each step, waiting for the exact moment to touch you deeply. Today, it's not just another video. It is a divine calling. It's his voice breaking through your defenses, tearing through the lies the world has told you, and reaching the deepest place of your pain. Because there is a place in you that only Jesus can touch. There is a silence within you that only he knows how to interpret. And there is a cry for help that you didn't dare voice, but he has already responded. He calls you by name, and what he wants to fill, no one else can. What he wants to heal, no psychologist, no relative, no friend would ever touch. Because only he saw what was broken before you even realized it. You feel it now. It's not emotion, it's presence. And this presence does not require performance, does not ask for explanation, does not demand history. She just wants permission. And if you allow it, Jesus now fills every hollow space in your soul. And when he comes in, he doesn't just comfort you, he restores you. He lifts up those who have given up, gives purpose to those who were lost, resurrects what was already dead inside. And that's why you're still here. Because there is something inside you that longs for this reunion, this reconnection, this living presence. Maybe everything you've been waiting for until today is exactly that. The moment when God becomes more real than pain. So right now in the comments, Jesus, fill my void, and do it as an act of faith, as a spiritual cry of someone who wants to start over, and share with someone who urgently needs this healing. Breathe, feel, because now, let's enter together into the most sacred part of this meeting, prayer. And it's not just any prayer, it is a cry for liberation. It is the moment when you and Jesus meet without complicated words, without masks, without barriers. Just an open heart, just true, just faith. If you are here until now, it is because God is working. He is responding. And allow yourself to be guided now, even if you've never done it before. Close your eyes if you can. Place your hand on your chest. Feel your breathing slowing down, because now let's pray. Lord Jesus, I recognize that I tried to fill my voids with so many wrong things, and nothing satisfied me. I ran, I hid, I even ran away from myself, but today I return. I return to the place I should never have left, your presence. I ask you now, Father, touch my wounded heart, heal what I can't even explain, erase the memories that still imprison me, free me from the thoughts that destroy me, and breathe upon me your spirit, who restores me and renews me. I no longer want to live in silence. I ask you, come in and make everything new. If this prayer moved you, don't leave yet. Because what you will discover in the video now appearing on your screen could be the continuation of what God started today. Don't ignore it. What comes next could be the missing piece to your total liberation. You need to watch. Something will be completed. And if you felt this, comment now. I made it to the end because you didn't just see a video, you lived an encounter. Share this message with someone who desperately needs it. Be an instrument of restoration in the life of another heart, and subscribe to the channel right now. Be part of this community where Jesus reveals secrets that transform, heal, and free you. Your registration is more than a click. It's a step of faith. It's an act of reciprocity. What you are getting here, many others also need to experience. And to seal this moment, keep this verse as an anchor for your soul. The Lord is close to those who are brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalms 34:18. You are no longer alone. You are no longer lost. Jesus saw you and ran to you. Now let him continue this work. Click on the next video, because what comes next could be the rebirth of your faith.